Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sweeney Show, Business and Law podcast. Joining me here today is Solicitor Jennifer O'Sullivan. Jennifer, you're very welcome.
Thank you, David.
So you're not just only a solicitor, you have created, or you're the founder of a brilliant website and online, I suppose, learning centre called The Law Hero. Where did the idea of The Law Hero come about?
Well, I'm obviously a young solicitor, so I'm only 3 years qualified. But when I trained as a solicitor with Arthur Cox in Dublin, we would go on road shows. So we would go to like UCC and Trinity and UCD, and you'd always have students come up to you and ask you, what's your background? How did you get in the door? How did you get a foot in the door? And I found myself just willy-nilly giving my email out to these people and kind of bringing a lot of work on myself, to the point that I was getting up at 4 a.m. before work to review CVs and cover letters. And I wasn't getting paid for it, but it was purely just I wanted to help these university students get a leg in the door if they didn't have a family member in law, or they just felt like to make connections was very difficult, and to network. It's very hard. It does
sometimes feel like it's a closed shop sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, and there's this belief that there's a lot of nepotism, and that if you come from the countryside, that your chances are less, or if you didn't go to a private school, that your chances are less. But I knew that wasn't the truth, so I was adamant that there would be people like me also, would have a chance to get into the profession. So I just took it upon myself to assist. And some people used to say like, oh, like you're my hero or you're an angel. And I kind of realized that wouldn't it be just better if we could all be our own hero, rather than always having to look for help outside of us. And I thought that maybe Law Hero would be a good way to kind of start the thinking process for people. And that's kind of where it came about.
And what's your own pathway into law? Did you study law as an undergraduate, or how did you come up? Because you're working in-house for a bank now, is it? How did you get to that position in your career?
So I studied law and German in UCC. I was one of the last people to study that, actually. And then I went and did an LLM in finance in Frankfurt.
So part of your education was you went to Germany?
Yeah, so because when you study a language with law, it actually really helps, because like lawyers are fundamentally linguists, and the more languages you can understand and the better communicator you become, actually better lawyer you become. So I was very interested in German law, which is civil law way of thinking. So I decided to do my LLM there because I wanted a challenge, and also I wanted to live in Germany and become fluent in the language. But then I realized that the process to become a solicitor in Germany is quite difficult. So that's why I came back and trained in Ireland. So I trained with Arthur Cox. I became a finance solicitor, capital markets and banking.
And did you enjoy your traineeship?
I really the training is exceptional with the big firms in Dublin. Like, they are what they are for a reason. They have the best clients in the country. However, I have to admit, I found the hours extremely taxing on me, psychologically, physiologically, and I decided then to...
What would have been an average working day for you there? What kind of hours would you be talking about?
12 to 14 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
Like, you know yourself. I mean, you have your own business. When it's your own business, I think it's more justifiable, though. And of course, like, law firms are based on a billable hours structure. Yeah. It's just the nature of the beast. But you either decide to be in that culture or you decide not to be. And 6 months after qualification, I decided it just wasn't for me. So I went in-house, which is actually quite unusual for a young solicitor. Usually young solicitors will stay in private practice for a few years before transitioning, because it's a big responsibility going in-house. But I just knew I couldn't wait. So I moved.
Well done, but that was probably a brave decision at the time, because you've had your training in a big firm and you're that's probably the pathway you were on. But I suppose it shows a bit of bravery and some self-awareness of where your skills are and where you want to be in the future.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it was. I was definitely an outlier. People thought I was crazy. They were like, you have a permanent job in a big law firm.
Yeah,
stay put.
You've made it.
But I was not on the trajectory to become a partner. I knew that, and so why would I sit there and keep a seat warm that wasn't for me ultimately, and that somebody else deserved to be in that spot? So I mean, I'm speaking about it as a weak decision, but it's not a weak decision. A lawyer is a lawyer.
Yeah, correct. And do you like in-house?
I adore it. I think if you have an entrepreneurial kind of economic leaning, to be close to the client and their strategy and their business decisions is really wonderful. And it was that I was missing that, I think, for sure, as a facilitator. To be in-house and understand how decisions are made is really something I really enjoy, especially in a bank.
And when then did the idea of Law Hero really get some traction and kind of take on, because it must take up a lot of your time, does it?
Yeah, it does take up a lot of my time. I don't measure how much time it takes up. I probably should, but there you go. So when I went in-house, I obviously had more time, and then I decided to go on the 4-day week so that I could launch the business.
Wow.
So that meant taking a pay cut. But I knew if I took the initial pay cut, well, look, to be honest, I wasn't sure if it was going to work out. I just had a feeling that people needed this, because I was just getting so many messages, and I just knew if I took the time and built it properly, they say if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took the guts of a year. I'm only operating a year, and I'm still not where I want to be. I know exactly what I wanted to be eventually, but that 4-day week gave me the chance to kind of build the business.
And what services does the business offer now?
So fundamentally, I offer FE1 notes, but it's not just notes. It's kind of more tactics around passing the exam.
Sure.
Like which exams you should do first, how you should approach them, and then I also do qualified lawyers transfer tests. So people, like I have people coming from Italy, US, France, Malaysia, Australia, Canada, who want to become solicitors in Ireland, and then I also do King's Inn entrance exam. So that's kind of just my new market, which I'm kind of getting into. It's basically the same, the entrance exam, but it's a little bit more nuanced because it's a different profession. So, and then I offer training contract tips as well.
Very good. And just in relation to, say, the Law Society or the solicitor pathway, what exactly is the FE1s? For someone who doesn't know, we're starting out now, maybe they have an undergraduate in law, maybe they haven't, maybe they're doing the Leaving Cert, or if the Leaving Cert goes ahead this year. But at that stage where they're trying to decide they are interested in law. So where do they go? What are the FE1s, and how do you become a solicitor in Ireland?
Okay, so the FE1 is simply the first examination that the Law Society offers to people who want to become solicitors. So it's an entrance exam, essentially. You don't need to have a law degree to sit the FE1s. Indeed, we're seeing an increase in people with engineering, arts, from all different disciplines. You simply need to have a level 8, so degree from an Irish university to sit the exam. So the exam consists of 8 different subjects.
But even if you don't have a degree, you can do. Sorry, Jennifer. Even if you don't have a degree, you can sit an entrance exam, isn't it?
Yeah, you can sit the preliminary examination. It's called. So, like, it's very much accessible to everybody, with basic education. It's not as people would believe a closed shop. Yeah. So it's quite accessible.
Sorry. So there's 8 exams. Is it 8 subjects?
Yeah, 8 subjects. Contract, company, tort, EU, equity, constitutional.
I think any solicitor in the country will just shiver when they hear about the FE1s and the 8 exams. They're a huge endeavour, aren't they? Like it's a big undertaking to take them on.
Yeah, and that's what I always say to people. Actually, even since the start of COVID-19, there's a lot of people who have been assessing their long-term goals. We'll say people who are maybe, customer service reps, or people who are doing kind of gig economy type um, jobs. And they're thinking, I do have a degree and I would like to be a solicitor. And they are contacting me, asking me about the effort that is required for the FE1. And I tell them all, like, I can give you the notes, but you're in this for the long haul. Like, this exam is it's taxing on your time. It's not the most difficult exam, like, to comprehend, because law is something we come across every day. And I'm not trying to say that it's an easy exam, but it's just the time you need to put in to cover the material is what's the tricky bit.
Yeah, what I found about them was if you go to college, your exams are generally they're 3 hours and you have 4 questions to answer in the 3 hours.
Yeah.
But in the FE1, you've actually to answer 5 questions, so it's a really, like, part of it is actually managing your time and being, I suppose, disciplined, because everybody will have a couple of topics that they're very strong in, that they'd like to start with the good questions. But I think does it work out about 23 or 25 minutes a question or something like that when you have reading time and finishing up, that if you go over that time at the start, you get stuck at the end. So it's all about just, I suppose, disciplining your time on the 5 questions, isn't it?
Exactly. And like, many a strong candidate has failed because their timing was off, which is a terror, because you've done the work.
Yeah.
So that's why I advise on strategy as well. I think strategy is just as important as doing the work.
Having a plan.
And yeah, so timing is one of those things I advise on. And the other thing as well is to know your audience. So this is a professional exam to get into a profession where you're advising the public and you have to have your client's best interest at heart. So it's different to an academic exam in that regard. And as you say, people are coming from that academic culture where you can speak in the abstract for many, many sentences and not really get to the point. Whereas here, your client is in front of you, or your examiner is in front of you, and you have to provide a solution, just like a solicitor does.
Yeah, and there was a real, I think the rules have changed, have they? But there was a really, there was a rigid set of rules about when you sat to your exams, you have to pass the 8, but you had to sit 4 the first time around and pass 3.
Yeah.
Have they relaxed that rule now?
Yeah, they have. So you can do 1 at a time. And the other really nice thing that the Law Society have introduced this year is that you can sit the exams in Cork, which you were able to do a while ago, but they're after reintroducing that, which I think is great. Yeah. I would have loved that. Yeah. I had to stay in the Red Cow for many nights on end, and it cost me a fortune.
Yeah.
But there's one other thing they introduced this year as well, that if you have completed that subject at undergrad, for example, if you do contract law in first year, you're entitled to sit that exam on the FE1, which is something you could never have done before.
Wow. Okay. That's good news, isn't it?
So it's very accessible.
Yeah, because the old rule about sitting 4 and passing 3, like, there was loads of cases where people passed 2 out of the 4, and you have to resit those exams you've already passed. And I presume they're still on only twice a year. Is it March and September, that timeline?
Yeah, exactly.
So when someone passes their 8 exams and they invest in their study and the time to do it, and they have the entrance exams, what's the next step after that?
Yeah, so this is the issue. This is exactly another reason why I set up Law Hero, because when you go for a job interview and when you need a training contract, so that's the next step after the FE1s, you need to go and find a training contract, and that simply means you find a solicitor who will train you as an apprentice or a trainee, and that will allow you sit the professional practice courses at the Law Society and then eventually be entered into the profession. But there is a big issue here, because usually the people who are going for training contracts have no legal experience, and the employers are expecting you to have your 8 FE1s done and have legal experience, which in the majority of cases people don't do. So a lot of people come to me and they're like, Jen, I'm not getting a training contract. I don't get it. I've got unbelievable results, but nobody wants to take me on. Like, what am I supposed to do? And that is another reason why I set up this business, because there's not much information around getting a training contract in this country. The fact of the matter is there aren't enough training contracts for the amount of people who are applying for them. And so that's one just economic fact people have to bear in mind. The resources are very low, and you basically have to pay for information. So that's why I make these YouTube videos, because just the basics people don't know, you know. They don't understand what the legal landscape is, so what the marketplace actually is, because there's just not, the information isn't out there.
What is the current landscape in the legal market? What advice do you give people in those circumstances?
Well, so, okay, I tell people to be realistic. I don't want to shatter people's dreams either. You need to be realistic, because it's an extremely competitive industry, and that's just the way it is. Results matter. So if you have a 1-1, you have a pretty good chance. But at the same time, if you don't have any social skills when it comes to the interview, if you can communicate ideas, your 1-1 is going to be no use to you. At the same time, if you have a 2-1 and you're a very good communicator and people would like to work with you day to day, you have a much, much better chance. So yeah, you do have to look good on paper, but you also need to interview well. To even get an interview, though, you need to have legal experience. So this is a bit of a touchy subject.
Catch-22, isn't it? It's a bit of a catch-22, isn't it?
It's a catch-22.
You need the job to get the experience, but the job will only hire you with the experience. So you're caught in this cycle all the time.
It's a loop. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like putting the cart before the horse. But what I did was I just begged solicitors in my town, in Mitchelstown, and also in other like neighbouring towns. Like I remember a solicitor from Charleville let me go with him to court and like colour in some maps. I mean, I was 16, but that still counts as experience. And when I was in Germany, I did the same. I would literally go up to solicitors and be like, please, can I just watch you in your day-to-day? I don't want any money. Now, I know the money thing has changed now with paralegals and interns, and the law has changed. But if you're in a situation where, you know, you're living at home and your parents are looking after you, there's no reason why you cannot shadow somebody and just pick up some of their knowledge. And it does contribute to your CV. And that is classified as legal experience. There's other ways as well. If you want, you could do some FLAC, which is the Free Legal Aid Centre. That would count as legal experience. So there are ways to get around it. But the fact of the matter is, if you have zero legal experience, you are not going to get a training contract.
And you're also, in your spare time, what spare time you have is quite the sports person. I know you do triathletes. Do you think there's a crossover in sport and philosophies of how you apply yourself to sport and work, and especially into a law career?
Absolutely. Sorry, now it's very bright here in Dunleary. Yeah, I mean, for me, the crossover with sport and being in a corporate job is massive. So this idea came to me. I read this article in the Harvard Business Review called The Corporate Athlete. And I was like, what's this corporate athlete? That's kind of a funny term. And it turns out that these psychologists in the US started comparing people who are, you know, in a business, they're very successful executive, and also, we'll say, top athletes. And there's so many crossovers in how both of these groups perform that they coined this term, the corporate athlete. So basically, the corporate athlete ticks 4 boxes. They're spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally put together. So what this means is, so physical is something we can all understand. If you look after your body will look after you. It's a very easy concept to understand. It's the exact same with an athlete. Again, we all know people who don't look after themselves, and they get along fine for a few years, but eventually it catches up with them. Just like people who are athletes and don't do the conditioning that they need for longevity in the sport. So I found this extremely interesting. I just applied this rhetoric to everything I do. And I also try and bring it into Law Hero, because I think you won't last the going if you don't look after these other areas. You know, your brain is only so good to an extent, but if your body starts to fail on you, you won't be able to deliver, you won't be able to perform. So yeah, that's where the kind of sport rhetoric comes from.
And do you think?
And then, yeah.
Sorry, Jennifer. Yeah.
No.
So yes, I agree, do you think sport though do you have to be an individual athlete or a team sport? Do you think there's a crossover there? Is there any transference in working team sports and working in an organisation, or does it matter?
I think sport is amazing because it doesn't discriminate, and like definitely during this COVID time, we all see the impact of not having sport to watch, not having competition. Like, we're human, we need to interact with each other physiologically. So when you're on a team, like I played camogie my whole life, and that takes you out of your own head. You have to stop being selfish, and you have to pass the ball and set it up so that the team wins. When you're doing individual sport, you learn a lot about yourself. So both of those are very positive and have a great influence on your working life. The other thing as well is sport brings people together outside of the sporting arena.
Yeah.
So, you'll see alliances being forged between people who support the same soccer team, or, people who just like to talk about sport. It's a massive part of being a human.
Yeah.
So I think to ignore it is kind of, senseless.
Sorry, can I just take you back there to the FE1's preparation and the exams? What's your view on the Irish exam? How does someone study or work? Because you have to have an Irish exam or sit an Irish exam to become a solicitor in Ireland. What's your advice to someone setting out on that path?
Yeah. Oh, do you mean the Irish exam, as in the Irish speaking exam?
Yeah.
In the PPC 1? Yeah.
Is there not one in the FE? Oh yeah, the PPC 1. Yeah, the Irish exam. Is there not an entrance exam as well? No.
Yeah. No. It's not part of the entrance exam. You have to do it on PPC 1.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I know somebody from Moldova who did that exam, and his English wasn't even good. So I mean, it was so sweet. We just phonetically wrote out all of the stuff for him, and he was literally like "Ta me Dliador," which is the Irish for solicitor. And he was brilliant, and he passed it. So I mean, they're not going to come down hard on somebody who's not even Irish in the first place.
Yeah.
But it is a necessary evil, because there are a certain cross-section of the population who need legal services in Irish. So that's why we have to do it.
Yeah, and any plaintiff in the courtroom has the right to have their case heard in Irish by a judge, and so potentially any solicitor should be able to speak the dialect. But do you think in a way it's a barrier for people not from Ireland or haven't studied Irish to become a solicitor?
In practice, I don't think it's a barrier. I think when we talk about it here, yes, it is a barrier. But it's one of those legitimate barriers, isn't it? When you talk about, like, there's been so much case law around freedom of movement of people and discrimination on language terms. But I mean, in practice, they want to see you pass that exam, because, you're not going to actually, where they fall down on more is your attitude towards it. So people who, like, will say deliberately skipped the Irish part, as in they just didn't turn up to the class, they're going to get a straight fail. But if you make any type of an effort, the Law Society are very amenable. Yeah,
there's an oral exam as well. I remember it. God, yeah, it's not good.
Yeah.
My Irish wasn't great. It isn't great. It's funny, but they're very helpful. And like, you get there in the end. Listen,
you get there in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Look, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. What are the plans for Law Hero in the future and yourself professionally?
I want Law Hero to be a community, and I know everybody bandies that term around, but I want it to be like an end-to-end place where we'll say you're a law student, you find me on the internet, I give you some tips, you go away and you live your life, then you come back to me for your FE1s, whatever, get more tips. I just want it to be a resource for somebody for the longevity of their legal career, and as I grow, the more I learn, I just want to share it with people. I just think it's a journey, it's a community. Me professionally, like, I love being an in-house solicitor, but I feel like somehow I'm being shifted towards legal education the whole time. I don't know what it is. Definitely like law is where I'm supposed to be. I just adore it as a profession, but how that's communicated in the future, I'm open to all options.
And if you were someone was setting out on a legal career now, maybe they're just leaving school or in college, what advice would you give them? Would you recommend law as a career, and how would they start out in their career?
Yeah, it's a really great career. It's not easy. That's one thing I will say. You have to have a certain amount of grit, but it's also not closed off to people. I think if you are interested in a career of law, you should look at your strengths. So, to be a solicitor, you have to have a certain amount of empathy for your client. You have to understand how the economy works. You need to be able to communicate ideas in a simple, kind of coherent manner that provides a solution. People come to solicitors normally when things are bad, and that's just the truth about it. And a lot of the time, you're helping somebody get out of a messy situation, and you have to understand your role there. You're being trusted to navigate them through a sticky situation, and if you're not down with that, you're just not going to last in the profession. So yeah, it is a caring profession in a kind of covert way, I think. It's not like the medical profession where you can see exactly the result when you help somebody, but it is a caring profession, I think. And it's a wonderful profession. Wow. It really is.
That's great advice, Jennifer. Thank you so much for your time. We really look forward to seeing Law Hero grow over the next months and years. It's a really great idea. It's going to be a great service. It's very useful. Where can anybody find you? Where does Law Hero live? Is it YouTube, Instagram?
Yeah, you just simply Google Law Hero and you'll see my website. I'm on YouTube as well. So yeah, just put in Law Hero into the search bar. And I'm on Instagram. So simply just use the term Law Hero. Nobody else is using it.
There's probably not many out there, Jennifer. So yeah, well done. Well, listen, thank you so much for the time. We sincerely wish you all the best for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.